please come to this city council meeting? Can we please come to this rally? Come to this neighborhood gathering? And you're not trying to change their mind on the issue. They agree with you, but they don't have time. You know, they're otherwise preoccupied. And you say, you don't have time? You don't have time for democracy? You don't have time for democracy. You don't have time for the future of your children. You don't have time for peace. You don't have time for justice. What's filling up everybody's time? Oh, people have jobs, they commute, and they have to worry about their families, but there's always time for civic duties. And a lot of people who are, some are retired, or they've got time on their hands. I mean, what do you think the entertainment industry is all about? It wouldn't exist if people didn't give it time, right? Look at all the TV programs, the cable programs, one junk after another. And also, this is the city of the Better World Club. How many people here belong to the Better World Club? It is the alternative to AAA. It's a motor club for the peace, for the environment, for consumer respect. And it's right here, started right here in Portland, Oregon. So how easy, we look at it, we've learned to pronounce Oregon right. And you come up with some good things. The first public interest group we started in the country, started out of Oregon State. Right here in Oregon, early 70s, huge rally, and they voted to put $5 on their tuition bill, and they started Oregon Public Interest Research Group. You may know Oregon Group. And one of the offshoots was 1,000 Friends of Oregon, dealing with coastal issues and so on. And it taught a lot of undergraduates and graduate students civic skills, something we don't learn in school, civic experience, how to be resilient, how to get discouraged, how to use tools of democracy. So it's clearly an opportunity to set a model here. Going yes on 26-184 is going to set a model. There aren't many cities, counties in this case, but you might get the city version too through the city council in the coming months. There aren't many metropolitan areas who are doing this. New York City has one. Mark Green, my colleague, got elected public advocate and got that through. But things tend to diffuse and spread, right? It's not only bad things that spread, like microbes and viruses. You know, good ideas, good democracy models spread. But I'm often bridled against this phrase, campaign finance. You know, sometimes we adopt bureaucratic phrases, and they don't say, they don't mean much to people. And so I try to avoid, although if you don't find something clear, it's hard not to use it. Campaign finance reform. We have to get campaign finance reform. We have to get big money out of politics. Okay, that spells it out a little bit more clearly. But then when you ask, what is it that big money in politics does to us? Are you ready? Are you ready for all the examples? Well, this is just a few of the list from my own experience. First of all, it takes up a lot of time of the lawmakers. Instead of paying attention to your problems in the neighborhood, and city, county, and state, they're on the phone or they're going to these fundraisers. Now, Barack Obama was paid to be a full-time president. He's gone to 500 fundraisers out of town on Air Force One to fat cat gatherings in his 8 years. That's 500 days. When he should have been on the job, or he should have been talking to citizen groups, or he should have been going around the country mobilizing people, so he couldn't say to you, well, I couldn't do much, my hands are tied, the Republicans won the House and the Senate, when they shouldn't have won. The Democratic Party's been totally unable to defend the American people from the worst Republican Party in history. And he gives that. I go up on Capitol Hill, I call it Withering Heights. And you cannot believe the time they spend raising money. Now, it's illegal to do it from their Senate and representative offices. You know what they do? They go to the Republican National Committee building or the Democrat building or a hotel just to block yourself. And so you see all these people coming out day after day. They're only working 125 days this year. You're paying them full time, 125 days. And they go into these cubby holes with phones, and they got their minders, you know, their young assistants, telling them, okay, it's Janet Jones, it's Joe Smith. Now, here's what you should say. The daughter just graduated from high school and won award playing soccer. You know, started that way before you make the ask. 20 hours a week, at least, they spend on the average going into these apartments, these office buildings. So there's one representative, he's a Republican from Florida. He's introduced a bill called the STOP Act. You should look it up. He's got only 8 co-sponsors. Because what it does is, it prevents, it prevents senators, representatives from personally asking for money. They can't do it. They have their assistants maybe, but they cannot get on that phone and ask for money. It's called the STOP Act. So get Senator Biden, Senator Merkley, like the representatives, to get on board here. We're paying them to stay and work on the job. They've got to oversee the Pentagon, the Department of Interior, the Department of Agriculture, the FDA. They're not doing their job. They got to be careful with your money on appropriations. Instead, they rubber stamp 50 billion, just like this bing, bing, bing for the Iraq, Afghanistan war. They don't have earrings on them anymore. They're not watching how your money is spent. So that's one thing. It takes up their time in the worst way. The second is they develop social networks. You know, when you're a big donor, that's not the end of it. You don't just write a check. You invite them to play golf, and the senators and representatives, or you invite them on a jaunt to Bermuda, or to Las Vegas, or to Switzerland. Pretty soon, you're really friends with these big fat cats. You're a legislator, and you've got a kid, you want to get into a nice private school, you know, New York City, Manhattan, and you call up this billionaire who's given a lot of money to this school, as well as to you. And you can, Joe, can you sort of ease our way here? Can we get a little bit ahead of the line? And Joe says, yeah. And then that's a big hook into the lawmaker. And you just multiply all these social interactions that follow the donation of the check. And you're out in the field. Who are you compared to these people? Tickets to the football games. Why do they want to have these fancy stadiums with these boxes? Because these are the boxes where the lobbyists and the owner and the lawmakers come. And they'll fall all over themselves to go into the box and see the Washington Nationals or the Baltimore Orioles or the Ravens or the Redskins. And these are the donors. So it gets tighter and tighter. Some of them are professional. The doctor makes a big donation to a senator or someone. And then the senator's child is ill, and they want to get a better hospital, let's say, and there's not any room, and they phone up the doctor. I mean, after a while, they own you see? So that's very important, the social networks. One of my representatives from Connecticut, we opened the first law museum in the world, and he wasn't coming to see it. I mean, this is a guy who goes to every ribbon-cutting thing you can imagine. And I'm saying, you know, what's wrong here? Why don't you come? I mean, you go all over your district. It's not that big compared to the Oregon district. And I called him once and I said, can you come? He said, yeah, I'm going to South Korea. I've been to China, and I've been to Japan, but I'm going to South Korea with United Technologies because we want jobs in Connecticut. We want to sell United Technology products, you see. And I said, you're going to go to South Korea and you won't go to Winston, Connecticut? Well, he finally came. But it was difficult. Look at the priorities. Here we have the law of wrongful injury, which deals with millions of people being subject to product defect, injury, toxic pollution, medical malpractice, flammable fabrics, you name it. And tort law gives you the right to go to court, have a trial by jury, get compensation, disclose the defect to protect other people who may not have known about it, like a car defect, like the Volkswagen or the GM, all those And so it's a very important subject. It's one of our great liberation movements out of medieval England, because in those days, they're revenge killings. That's the way they settled wrongful injury. They went after each other. And they said, okay, let's stop and go to court, and let's have a trial by jury of your peers. And we imported that and built on it, and now the insurance companies out there are trying to crush it. Well, it's not like the lawmakers are rushing to go see this. It's not like the judges are rushing to go see this museum, because they're friends with the insurance companies. They're friends with the corporations. Even something as simple as that. They will defer, but they won't defer a nice dinner. They won't defer a nice junket by these corporations. So watch the social networks. They become deadly obstacles, all because money is transferring in the campaign corruption process. The third is, it reduces access to your own lawmakers. Right now, you call a senator and representative, and they really look you up on the screen. If they don't ask you whether you're a donor, they look you up on the screen to see if you're a donor. And if you're a donor, how much you are, to see the eminent senator or representative. Otherwise, you'll end up with an intern or an assistant, if you're lucky. So it restricts access. If you can't eyeball your lawmaker, you lose a lot of influence. Because the real powerful lobbies in our country, they don't deal with demonstrations and rallies. They don't have those. They have to do in-person lobbying on each lawmaker. They get to know them, they get access, they sit in the office. Sometimes the lawmaker goes to their office. You don't ever see, the NRA or APAC or the military-industrial complex having massive demonstrations, like the military-industrial complex, banners, Lockheed, more bombs, more nuclear stuff. We want F-35. They know every single member of Congress, who they work with, who they play with, who they're relying on, who they golf with, what their staff is like, what they vote, what they don't want to face up to, what their background files are all about. That's the way they are. And they grease it with the money, because the money gets them in the door. The next one is, when you rely on your lawmaker, let's say a county, a citizen, state, legislator, you get lazy when you rely on money. Here you are, you've been elected 6 year, 8 year, 10 year. You don't have much of an opponent, you've got all kinds of money. And you get lazy. You don't go out and try to meet the people. You don't go out and try to see what they need, what they want to tell you about. Other than very superficial. They go to high school reunions or they go to birthdays or clan days. It's very superficial, county fairs. But I'm talking about real interaction with people. Because you know you're going to get reelected. Because this gets my next point. When you have a pile of money, it intimidates anyone from challenging you, either in a primary or another major party. That's why we have basically districts that are slam dunk re-election districts in this country, and they're gerrymandered. And gerrymandering, in fact, eliminates the other major party opponent. Because if you run the state government and you carve up these districts that look like snakes and so on, you're basically ensuring the re-election of your party standard bearer. And you're assuring you're going to get either no opponent, there's some congressional district, there's virtually no opponent, major opponent, and a lot more at the state and local level. Or you're just going to get some accountant who wants to get his name in the paper and get it on his VI and just meet new customers, but it's just a nominal party challenge. So it detonates the only thing left for a competitive electoral democracy, which is a two-party contest. I mean, they say, what do you think of this electoral contest? It's not a contest if it doesn't have at least two people who are bidding for your votes. It keeps getting worse. Scaring away opponents. Elizabeth Warren was scared away. You know why? Because when people were urging her to run before Bernie decided to run, she looked at the scene and saw Hillary Clinton with a pile of money. Basically, the message is, don't even try. Because she soaked up all the donors. If you start calling, you're going to say, I gave it to Hillary. Don't even try. It's inevitable. it's going to happen. She's going to be the nominee. And I'm sure if Elizabeth Warren knew then what she knew now after the Bernie Sanders campaign, she would have run. Now, Bernie had nothing to lose. He started out at 3%. Nobody thought he could, break 10%. A Democratic socialist. 74 years old, white hair, not exactly a charismatic speaker, a heavy Brooklyn brogue. And he would have, I guarantee you, he would have beat her if it wasn't for two things. Dirty tricks by the Democratic establishment. And that's not a supposition. Look at the WikiLeaks. Right. Because in close races, he could have come out with 3 out of 3 early primary, great momentum. Could have come Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, New Hampshire. He won New Hampshire in a landslide. But he dismissed in Iowa and Nevada, and there were some dirty tricks that tipped in one way. And then the other thing is, she starts out with 20% of the unelected superdelegates, mostly her cronies in Capitol Hill and the Democratic establishment. That's who the superdelegates are. And he almost beat her. He would have beat her. And now it's dissipating, and all his followers are reported, what are we going to do? He folds into the Democratic rock because he promised a year ago he'd support the nominee. However, look what that tells us. That tells us that money sometimes is not the big obstacle. Big fat cat money with strings attached, because what he proved was that he could raise $235 million in $27 average contributions over the internet, never have to go to a fat cat fundraiser where he gets on his knees in Park Avenue in Beverly Hills, never have to have a super PAC. So basically he showed that you cut out the fat cats, you go down to what ordinary people can write a check for, and then the rest is human energy. It's rallies, it's getting out to vote, all the rest of it. So while money nullifies your vote in many elections, big money neutralizes your vote. That doesn't have to be the case, and the Bernie Sanders example is a way out. But the present system is very corrupt with fat cat money and super PAC money, and the amount of money is just staggering. You heard the earlier speaker, I think it was Dan, talk about how much it costs to run for the state senate here. I mean, over the last 15 years, it's 30 years, it's unbelievable. Stacked $700,000 or some dollars for a state senate seat. Money also has stamina more than we do. I hate to say it, because fat cats always have money. They can always write the check, election after election. But citizens, they lose energy after a while. They can go up, and then they get beat, and then they get discouraged, and have to start again. But money has stamina. Part of its devastating effect is always there, and it's there in geometric proportions. And it's really going up like this at the federal level. There's so much money, it's going into super PACs, it's overshadowing the money collected by the Democratic and Republican national committees. And you have guys like Adelson, gambling czar. You know, to show you our culture is in decay. 30, 40 years ago, anybody who was in the gambling industry, never mind a failed gambling czar and corporate welfare king like Donald Trump, wouldn't even have dared talk about it. It would be completely taboo. What? A gambler running for the U.S. presidency? For example, big money in politics leads to weak enforcement to protect your pensions, your consumer dollars, and keep your wages down. When Walmart gives money to these legislators, state and national, the result is they freeze the minimum wage. They don't adjust it for inflation. So here's an example, a real-life example. There are 1 million workers in Walmart today. Just imagine they're going to work. Lucky if they get 40 hours. Sometimes 30 hours, 25 hours, scheduled, messed up. Who cares about the family, the kids? Call Walmart, run by CEOs making $12,000 an hour. Not counting benefits. There are 1 million Walmart workers making less today than 1968 adjusted for inflation. That means they're making less than $11 an hour. And why do you think that's the case in one state after another? Well, some states are going up, Seattle is going up a little bit higher than the government. The federal government is 7.25, and I'm frozen. It's money. Hillary Clinton was on the board of directors of Walmart. She was the last prominent Democrat to support the Democrats' bill in Congress in 2014 to raise it to $10.10 an hour. Money. Money takes your money, big fat company. You're entitled to take it personally. See how bad a phrase this campaign finance reform is all about? Right? So when you're not protected, when big banks can open up fake accounts like Wells Fargo, when big banks can rip you off in 1,000 ways, right? It's because the laws are not being enforced. Why are the laws not being enforced? Because big money goes to the White House, big money goes to Congress, and here's the other consequence. They cut enforcement budgets. They cut the number of federal cops on the corporate crime beat to the bone. It's like having a massive crime wave in the streets of New York and only 100 cops. That's another consequence. Here's another one. There's so many of them. Here's another one. Politicians raise money in order to get the vote out. That's one of the ways they spend money. Please vote. Please come out to vote. We have to get our base out. We have to get our base out. Now, if we were like in Australia, we wouldn't have to worry about that because it's a duty. It's a legal duty. Now, you can get out if you're sick. If you don't vote, and you have no excuse, they hit you with a $25.50 fine for the electoral pot. And so they get 96% out. We're lucky if we get 60% out for president and 40% out for congressional elections. And some primaries are down to 8%. And so politicians, good ones too, are spending a lot of money trying to get your vote out because we don't have voting as a universal duty, which I favor. There's only one duty in the Constitution, which is jury duty, and people like to get out of that. But there's a Bill of Rights. The Constitution is full of rights. There's one duty. And I think if we give people the option of none of the above, binding none of the above, I think that's solving civil liberties. All right, so another thing that big money does, there's a lot of quid pro quos. You know how money is transferred to politicians. I mean, they don't exactly say, here's $200 or here's $5,000. I want you to send me a letter assuring me that my bill will get a hearing. That's direct bribery. So it's very indirect. I hope you'll look out for us. And, all kinds of winks or third-party assurances. But one of the things that's done is it kills law enforcement when it comes to corporate outlaws. If you think that your housing codes are not being enforced and protecting tenants in city after city, how come? One is, the housing code inspector is totally beleaguered. They don't have enough housing code inspectors. The second is, if the housing code inspector really does a terrific job, the housing code inspector hears from upstairs, and it's usually an elected official who's getting money from the developers or the apartment buildings association. Now you multiply that in one area after another. Why aren't the auto safety law recalls enforced? Why aren't the pollution control laws enforced? Why aren't the Wall Street crimes enforced? Small enforcement budget, and it all comes back to Congress, and they go up to Congress, and without any fanfare, they cut the budget. Now here's an example. This to show you how totally nonsense our elections are. One of the reasons why they're so insipid, they don't cover issues that are your concern, they don't talk about it. They usually come down to 2 or 3 or 4 issues: crime in the street, gun control, immigration, recently. But there are all kinds of issues. What about the corporate crime wave, right? Why don't they talk about that? Cracking down on crime in the suites. So here's one. Just pick it out of the hat. You cannot believe the money that's stolen from you because it's stolen indirectly. Okay, so we're looking into this $3.3 $2.3 trillion that we spend on healthcare. It's staggering. It's almost the size of Germany's GDP, just on healthcare. It turns out that 10% goes down the drain under a title called Computerized Billing, Fraud, and Abuse. That's $330 billion this year. The Pentagon budget is about $650 billion, which is half of the U.S. government's operating expenditure, not counting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, their insurance. There are so few investigators and prosecutors in the federal government to go after these crooks that they collect about $5 billion of that 330. Medicare alone is drained, according to the federal official figures, of $60 billion a year by corporate crime. Manipulating codes, phantom charges, they got it down to the science. That's $60 billion a year. Never talked to them. Now, how come members of Congress who are told again and again by federal officials, you give us $1 more in enforcement, we'll bring you back 10 in recovery. That's pretty good investment. Okay? They will not increase the budget because they go to these dinners, they go to these fundraisers, they go to these PACs, and they're selling out $330 billion a year for a few $1 million of campaign pottage. See the leverage that goes on? I don't want to give you too much of this. I'll give you one more. Now, the ratio again is every buck brings in $7 to $10 of enforcement. Now, okay, some of this is underground economy, you know, the usual repair, give money to some repair person. But let's say $200 billion is really bad stuff. Can you imagine what that would do in terms of helping to rebuild our country? Imagine what it would do to school renovation, and public transit, and changing that library, bringing it up to date, setting up a community health clinic. So you have all these huge drains, and we're not even getting to the military. Why is the military budget sacrosanct? That's the phrase. Never is criticized by the Democrat Republican Party. Hillary won't criticize it. Trump won't criticize it. They all want to either modernize it, that's the Democratic word for expanding it, or they want to expand it, that's the Republican word for increasing it. And it's because there is this military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. And here's how it works. The Pentagon has someone, a major or higher, on every member of Congress. Because they're always lobbying. They got to get this money, they got to get that budget, they got to get this cost overrun paid for, and so on. In the meantime, the contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and so on, they want to hire these guys in the Pentagon because they're influence peddlers. And so the generals, the admirals, and the colonels, they just bide their time, put in their time. Some of them are honest, they don't do it. But there's a whole pot of gold out there, so when they're negotiating the contracts with Lockheed Martin on the cost overrun F-35 that's going through the roof, they're saying in the back of their mind, you know, I really want to work for Lockheed Martin when I finish my 20 or 30 years in the Pentagon. And that's one reason why the Pentagon budget is sacrosanct, to the degree where it's the only department in the government that is unauditable. The Government Accountability Office, the accounting arm of Congress, first-rate agency, every year reports on all the departments and agencies and ends up with an audited budget. That's the law. Since 1992, you violate the law if you have an agency that does not provide auditable information. Well, the only one violating it is the Pentagon since 1992. And they're always trying to do it. Well, don't worry, another 3 years, we'll do it another 4. How about starting with the Marine budget? And it never happens. Why? Can you imagine having half of the government's operating expenditures unaudited? Here's what happens. And this is due to money in politics and the long trail and the grease and the cowardliness and the self-censorship and the bureaucratic fear of being hammered by some senator or representative, and what have you. So $9 billion were lost in Iraq in the first year, acknowledged by the Pentagon. They don't know where it is. They don't know what happened to it. Hey, for most people, $9 billion is a lot of money. $9 billion not accounted for. How about this? The Air Force was caught buying billions of dollars of supplies because they didn't know what was in their warehouses. Later on, they found out they had the supplies already all over the world. No audit. My favorite is I've been a Delta airline pilot recently. And, we got talking. Most of them are military pilots, and then they go to the civilian. And I said, well, did you fly for the Air Force? He said, oh, yeah. And one thing led to another before he headed to the gate to fly the plane. And here's what he told me. He was flying in Okinawa, and just before the fiscal year, the tradition of the Air Force is they got to spend the entire budget. If they don't spend the entire budget, they can't get the same budget reward the next year. But some honest people in Congress would say, why do you need more? You didn't spend it all. So you know what they told them to do? And this is routine. I know you're not going to believe this because you're still got a residual of innocence in you. Here's what they do. They get up in the air in a squadron and they dump the fuel in the ocean. So their whole fuel budget is used up before June 3rd. That's just the beginning. How about this? The Libyan War wouldn't have happened without Hillary. I'll give you a little prediction. Everyone now is scared of Trump. Democrats are horrible Trump. He is. He's unstable. Everything is a bruised ego. Gets up 3 in the morning and Twitter is about a former Miss Universe who's overweight. I mean, you got a combination of Dr. Strangelove and Captain Queen. Hillary is going to give you that. Hillary is the candidate of war and Wall Street based on her own. And here's how Hillary toppled the regime in Libya, which led to unbelievable continual chaos, weaponry, splitting into 7 African countries, tens of thousands of deaths, refugees, Libya, Mali, and so on. She got called up from some people in Britain and France, said, hey, Gaddafi, he's mending fences, he's got rid of his weapons of mass destruction. He's a bad guy, and we can topple him. And so Hillary, she scares the generals, Hillary. She is bad hawk. And she goes to the White House, and Obama calls in Secretary of Defense Gates. And Gates says, don't do it, Mr. President, because you know what's going to happen the day after? Are we ready? You got tribal warfare, sectarianism, outside interference, militias, and it's going to spill into Africa, the rest of Africa, North Africa, Central Africa. And Hillary said, Mr. President, we have highest assurances from our British and French allies that this will be an aircraft war. Nobody will get hurt. It's just a matter of bombing, and will help the rebels. It was an incipient civil war. Will help the rebels, and we'll get rid of another dictator. So Obama is saying, well, we're never going to get that money from Congress. No problem. They took it out of the black budget in the Department of Defense and other places. They spent $1.5 billion to overturn the regime. In the process, by the way, they killed 7,000 people. And listen to this. There is no congressional declaration of war. Constitutional crime number 1. There is no congressional authorization of funds. Constitutional crime number 2. There is no congressional appropriation of funds to pursue the war. Constitutional crime number 3. That's the kind of Congress we have, because they're in bed with the fat cats of the military-industrial complex. And now, it's going Somalia, Yemen. You don't think it's coming here? It's coming here for a very simple reason. We're provoking more and more of these warriors or fighters called terrorists. We kill a lot of civilians too, many Iraqi civilians. That's all that have died so far from our criminal invasion of Iraq. But what happened is that they're getting more numerous. Starts out with a gang in northeast Afghanistan, 9/11. And the more we kill their leaders, the more they replace, the more they spread. Now they're in 20 countries, not just ISIS and Syria and Iraq. And they're getting smarter. Number one, they're getting smarter in social media. Number two, they're getting smarter in the kind of weapons they use. And they don't have a Navy or Air Force. Can you imagine 3,500 fighters poorly trained in Mosul? Or, it's a big deal. They've got the biggest military power imagined. And they're going to take weeks to take it. 30,000 Taliban in sandals, Kalashnikovs, and so on, holding down the huge Afghan army and the U.S. military. Why are so few people with no Air Force and Navy, why are they holding us down? Because they have the biggest argument they'll ever have in the world. They want to expel the invader. The same if we had an invader. They will expel the invader. And if people don't support them in the villages, they can force them to support them. Because who's going to stand up against fighters who are going to expel the invader? The U.S. and the West. Been around for 110 years. Carving them up, supporting dictatorships, killing people, arming them, giving horrible people cover in the United Nations. And they wonder why? They want to get in our backyard? And they're going to get in our backyard. They have suicide bombers lined up. They can't use them fast enough. From Chechnya and from Afghanistan and elsewhere. Young men usually, sometimes young women, with nothing to lose, impoverished, no future, nothing to lose. And they might get some money for their wretchedly poor families if they become suicide bombers. Now this is a vicious, failing foreign military policy. It's endangering our country. It's killing people over half the world. And we elect one of the war hawks of all hawks, President of the United States, because the other guy's a buffoon. That's the choice we get. So we deserve better. Okay, talk about being a toady of Wall Street. I mean, she can't wait to go to social gatherings. She hugs Henry Kissinger. Lloyd Blankfein, the head of Goldman Sachs, was bailed out by billions of dollars and strip mined all kinds of pensions and mutual funds. When they were paying her for these speeches, and she won't release the transcripts. Some of them were released by WikiLeaks. They were paying her $5,000 a minute. A minute, right? And here's the contract. I saw her lecture agency contract, the Harry Walker Agency. Closed doors, banking, conventions, other conventions, drug industry conventions. Closed doors, no press, and she made the convention people pay $1,000 for a stenographer in order to provide a transcript exclusively for her possession. And why doesn't she want to release the transcripts? I've done a video on her release of transcripts. I've demanded it, so have others. It's because that's why 60 to 65% of people think she's untrustworthy. She says one thing behind closed doors to these corporate fat cats to get money and everything. And she says another thing on the hustlings mimicking the language of Bernie Sanders. And it's already beginning. Watch the betrayal of Bernie Sanders. Watch the betrayal of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party on domestic and foreign policy. Yesterday, Senator Schumer was quoted this way. He's going to be the head of the U.S. Senate if they recover the Senate, taking Harry Reid's place. He said, and check this out. He said, Hillary Clinton, I, and Speaker Paul Ryan believe in corporate tax cuts for repatriating trillions of U.S. corporate profits abroad. It's already beginning. They're cutting a deal with Paul Ryan, a guy who's to the right of the right. Makes Goldwater, he's a liberal. And they're already cutting the deal with them before the election. Watch the betrayal. Money in politics. Money distorts public budgets. Why is it that they don't have money, as Michael Moore has pointed out? They don't have money for the schools. They don't have money for combating epidemics, the Center for Disease Control. They don't have money for job training. They don't have money to repair our public works. They don't have money to stem the scourge of soil erosion, very little talked about. They don't have money to resuscitate certain water bodies. They don't have money, but they have money for the 13th aircraft carrier. You know who our competitor is in the world in aircraft carriers? Italy. Italy has 2. Now, aircraft carriers, there's only one reason for aircraft carriers, because in any war, they're a sitting duck for missiles. The only reason is force projection against China. The only reason is empire. They're loaded with troops and planes, and they shoot up Central Asia and Afghanistan people and Iraq and so on in the past. That's $13 billion. And it's $1 billion a year to operate an aircraft carrier, one aircraft carrier. The distortion of budgets, law enforcement have all kinds of police and paraphernalia in the streets and so on and so forth. Virtually no budget for corporate crime enforcement, as I mentioned earlier. The theft of our future is well underway. The theft of our future means a corporate state. It means Wall Street over Washington, simple metaphor, turning Washington against us and serving big business for tax loopholes, giveaways, subsidies, handouts, etc. We own the public lands, and the resources are given away either at bargain-based prices or free. I don't know how many of you know that hard rock minerals under the 1872 Mining Act, that's gold, silver, molybdenum, etc., are given away to any company that discovers them on public lands for $5 an acre. So Barrick Oil Gold Company got $10 billion of gold in our land in Nevada a few years ago for $5,200. No royalties back to the U.S. government. Those things wouldn't happen without the mining Congress lobby blocking efforts by citizen groups in Washington to upgrade the Mining Act of 1872. So here we have the corporate state with the government power, and they are strategically planning. Just look at the list. The corporations, we're not talking small business. The big corporations, the global corporations that traverse the world, pitting governments against one another. The big corporations this is what they do. It's in their DNA. They strategically plan. They have to anticipate, predict, ward off opponents, undermine resistance, co-opt, buy, bribe, whatever. They have to have predictability for profits and sales and positioning against other companies. They are strategically planning our government, our elections, our politics. They're strategically planning our food, our health care, our energy. They're strategically planning childhood, commercial exploitation of childhood, undermining parental authority, all the TV programs, junk food, junk drink, more diabetes, more overweight children. It's okay, it's profits for General Foods and for the junk food industry. They're strategically planning our environment. They fight any efforts to control coal burning, pollution, and other toxins. They strategically plan our foreign and military policy. They plan our military budget, for which enough is never enough. They're planning our foreign policy because they have to have the U.S. Marines protect their investments overseas and have for 100 years or so. They're even strategically planning our genetic inheritance. They have patents on thousands of gene sequences. They're just getting ready. They're strategically planning government research and development that built all the new industries whose CEOs brag about as if it's they're doing. That strategically planning government R&D, half of the major pharmaceuticals you paid for to develop and clinically test. They strategically planning the taxpayer to fund the basic research for nanotechnology, biotechnology, containerization, innovation, semiconductor, the Pentagon invested to develop the internet. Now, isn't it time for we the people to strategically plan our own future? Big money in politics has another damage. They make money for big media. Look at the presidential debates, right? Big money comes in, and CNN makes more money, and Fox makes more money. For the first time, the media has admitted that elections and money in elections and advertisements, etc., are a profit center, a major, major profit center. Far more than that during the period of the elections than commercial ads. And what happens when the media looks at big money ads as a profit center and encourages the kind of insipid, vicious debates, Republican primary debates, for example, that increase the ratings. And Donald Trump once, in the early primary, said, I'm going to boycott Fox News and I'm going to depress their profits. I didn't like that for a breakthrough. Can you imagine? The bravado, but he knows it's true. Because he's the one who brought him the big ratings. All right, so this is the 50th anniversary year of unsafety and speed. And I see. And it put a lot of forces in motion, started a lot of groups. It couldn't happen today, unfortunately. And so I'm talking to Chuck Todd, and about a year or so ago, of being depressed. And I said, it's the 50th anniversary. Lawrence Spivak had me on when I was 31 years old, and he gave me most of the hour, and it got the whole issue before the country. Being depressed was really a big deal then. And would you like to have me on the 50th anniversary? You could have a clip, black and white TV, Larry Spivak. And he said, sign me up. And he hasn't been able to do it for a year, because New York won't let him do it. You see? And it's not just me. The electoral process, bought and paid for, has now put the civil society, the citizen groups who actually get things done all over the country, off limits. They can't get on. They're not asked for their opinions of the candidates on TV. They're not asked for their opinions on energy policy and health policy and tax policy and transit policy and housing policy. They have been put them off limits. Money. Just a couple more. A couple more.
Morgan's beat up.
Why do the rich and powerful hate America's children? What? They don't hate America's children. Are you kidding? Compare the way we treat America's children to Western Europe. There's paid paternity leave in Western Europe, paid child care, paid family sick leave. The way the French treat children in terms of medical care would shame us. We have 15 million children going to bed hungry at night. We have millions of them living in hovels if indeed they're not homeless. We have millions of children without health care coverage or just bad, incomplete health care coverage. They go to rotten schools in the inner city with broken desks and leaking roofs and freezing winters and lack of decent cafeteria. I've been to those schools. They should be eliminated, completely demolished. I was at one in Chicago where the teacher invited me during one of my campaigns, and it was a 5th grade class. He's since written a book on this. And he invited me, and I said, why are you inviting me? He said, I want you to come see the school. Because when I started teaching in September, I asked the students, what would you like to study? He said, 10-year-olds. What would you like to study? And you know what they wanted to have studied as a project? Their school. They wanted to replace it with a new school, and they wanted to document it, and they wanted to tell their elders how they were being treated and undermined and endangered. And I looked out the window, which was broken at the time, of one of the school classrooms, and I saw the giant skyscrapers of Chicago, the city that works. That's their motto. Right? So, let me tell you, it's not just what we have in our heads. We're going to have fire in the belly. We're not going to break our routines. We're going to go away from gatherings like this. How interesting. Did you hear that young man? He was in law school. What a fiery orator. How interesting. I don't want people to go away saying, how interesting. I want people to go away saying, we're going to form Congress watchdog groups, we're going to form state legislative watchdog groups, and we're going to use that extremely powerful branch of government to turn around the other two branches of government. And we're going to get way long overdue transformations in this country, because when we the people organize, and when we go for what people need, where they live, work, and raise their families, we have left-right coalitions that are unbeatable, no matter how much money is in politics, and no matter how powerful politics is. Last point, I'm sure you've been waiting for this. Why restrict how much money private people can put in politics? We should eliminate all private money in politics and have publicly funded. Doing it is a $300 voluntary check off on your tax return. You don't have to do it $1 if you don't. And a certain amount of free time on our airways we own. We're the landlords. Qualified candidates, and get done with it. Get done with it. But this is the first step. This is a clarion call. Look at all the groups supported here. This is a clarion call, and you're going to see how easy it is on November 8th. And you're going to go to the next step and the next step. Public elections should be funded by public money. It can be done voluntarily, like I mentioned, or it can be done by public allocation of money. After all, they shovel out hundreds of billions of dollars for corporate mismanagement, corporate welfare, crony capitalism, and then they say, oh, no, don't spend $1 billion and $2 to clean up our election corruption. So if they don't do it voluntarily, we should do it by public funding. Whatever it is, the goal has to be to let your vote count, to stop voter suppression, to stop obstructing third-party candidates and give you more voices and choices, to end gerrymandering, to have nonpartisan districts, electoral districts, and then to open up the debates so never again we can be accused of rationing debates. We don't ration Hostess Twinkies, we don't ration cosmetics. Why are we rationing debates? By a corporate debate commission, misnamed as the Commission on Presidential Debates, funded by Anheuser-Busch, AT&T, Ford Motor Company, run by the two parties to exclude competition, so that you are left with two bad choices and told, shut up and vote for one of them. That's not good enough for the American people. That we got to break up